Can you relate to this moment? Picture this. Your partner leaves their socks or underwear on the floor of the bathroom, or maybe right in the middle of the hallway, more times than you can handle. And all of a sudden, your brain goes from, oh, here we go again. Why do I have to pick these up every single day? Does my partner even care that I try to keep the house looking presentable? No, they don't even care. They have no respect for me and how hard I work every single day. Sound familiar? All of a sudden, a pair of socks on the floor equals a lack of respect. This kind of self-talk is step one to overcome before becoming a mom. Today's guest, Dr. Morgan Cutlip, has a degree in psychology, a master's in human development and family science, as well as a doctorate in counseling psychology. And she, along with her dad, run the fabulous resource for relationships called My Love Thinks. Today, you are going to learn from this expert mama how to involve your partner from the beginning in pregnancy and even before. You'll also learn what maternal gatekeeping is and the importance of releasing it, as well as the most important communication tool to keep that love present as we enter parenthood. This is such a hot topic that I wish was discussed more, so don't go anywhere. You're gonna love this one. You are listening to the Mamas in Training podcast, and I'm your host, Jessica Lorian. But I'm not yet a mom. I know that sounds crazy, but it's all because I'm here to learn right alongside you. I have an autoimmune disease, and I'm weaning myself off my medication, but until I am medication-free, my motherhood journey is a little bit delayed. So I decided to learn all about motherhood before I actually am one, and you are on this journey with me. So stay tuned as we learn from the amazing Dr. Morgan Cutlip all about how to keep our relationship strong and thriving as we enter motherhood. You went on a trip to DC, and this was an absolutely beautiful quote. You said, "The city represented the city of Baltimore. The city represented all that we had lost and all that we had gained."
Gosh, I actually forgot about that article, but I really liked that, writing that.
It was beautiful.
Thank you. That was such a, so my husband and I, we lived in DC, and I was pregnant in DC. And then we moved, and that's when our daughter Effie was born. So she was born in Florida. And so when we went back to DC for that trip, it was the first time we had been back in the city where she was conceived, where I spent my pregnancy. And so it was all of our pre-kid relationship for the most part, besides our early dating years, but existed in that city. And so I remember flying in and being moved to tears. Like, I did not anticipate all of those feelings rushing to the forefront.
And what were those feelings at that moment? Was it a sadness of the past? Was it a joy of the present? What was it?
It was both. And I think that's a good analysis of motherhood, is that it's often conflicting feelings at the same time. And the sadness was about, gosh, we had so much fun being able to be free and spontaneous and lazy. Like, we take for granted the ability to just lounge. I remember binge watching Sopranos in like our basement in Virginia. I'm like, those days are not easy to come by anymore. Yeah. So sadness about, I think, a loss of just the usness, of just the togetherness that we shared, just the two of us. And what a beautiful time that was for us. And that, eventually we'll get again. Kind of like sentimental, I think, feelings. And then the other piece is just this like sort of feeling of in awe. As I'm flying into the city, I'm coming into it with a completely different perspective, a completely different life, and a way different couple in person than I was when I lived here before. And so I think just feeling really humbled by that, I think is the best way to put it, by that change. Just the magnitude of how different our life is and how much I love that it's different and love what we have. But it's just a wild intersection of feelings.
crazy roller coaster that we kind of go on. It's like I'm picturing myself now, and I've had so many years of the lounging, of the binging. But then there's also such the desire for a baby, for a family, and to start that. And it is, I think, kind of scary to think that what you have could never be what you experience it to be anymore. And I think what we hope for is, for that love, for that partnership to grow and blossom into something even bigger and greater than it has been for the past however many years. But I think today we're really going to dive into how to navigate those times and keep it as close to what we originally fell in love with. You have a PhD in psychology, and you're a relationship expert and a lifelong lover of all things relationship. It actually was literally in your blood, literally through your dad, right? And you continue to work with him in your company. And so you've seen probably all the different categories: single, starting a relationship, in a relationship, going through probably moving out of relationships too. So if we're going to focus on this time as we prepare, as we're mamas in training, as we're expecting moms, if we're going to focus on that time, and we know that there's going to be a big life change for both ourselves personally and for our relationship. So what can we do, whether we're a mama in training like myself, an aspiring mom, or we're an expecting mama in training? What can we do during that time to really involve our partners and set us up for the best success possible?
Yeah, I think that's such a wise question, and one that not enough people think about. And quite honestly, I feel like I didn't think enough about this. Given all of my years of education and the field that I exist in, it was not something that was, I don't know why I didn't, but anyway, live and learn.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's why we get to have you here today. Like, this is the perfect example. And Morgan saying, this is what I wish I knew. And now you get to tell us.
Well, and I knew, and I just, I think we all like to think we're the exceptions, or we get caught up in the excitement of the pregnancy, or the excitement of the anticipation of pregnancy, that we forget about all of the massive things on the horizon that will change and will be beautiful, but will be hard. That just kind of gets shoved aside, and we're like, it'll be fine. There are a lot of things that you can do. So I did this post recently about changes after kids, and people get really fired up about sometimes posts that I totally don't see it coming. And it was the changes that happen in marriages after kids and the differences for men and for women. And there is nuance to this research, so I'm going to talk very globally, but recognize there's nuance here. In general, relationship satisfaction tends to dip a bit after kids. And the range of how long that lasts is like between 15 months to 4 years, which is a big range, okay? I guarantee you that depends a little bit on the temperament of your kids. but
For sure.
It comes back some, for the most part. But when you look at differences in what affects satisfaction for women, it's loss of freedom and increase in responsibilities. For men, it's pressure to provide, or financial pressure, and changes in sex life. So I share this information, and people, you get comments like, that's why I'm never having kids, or, all these sort of negative things. And in my perspective, information is helpful because it empowers you to make changes.
Absolutely.
If you see what's ahead of you, then you can prepare. I was hoping that people would read, and I think a lot did, right? Would see this post and say, this is a roadmap. These are the obstacles along the way, and what can we do to make sure we're strong going into this? And some things you cannot totally prepare for ahead of time because you can't anticipate, what your life will be like then, but you can have a plan for how the two of you can come together and talk about these things when they do arise. So plan for the things you can. How do we increase in responsibilities is a big one. You can get good in your relationship at managing who does what before kids come along. And this will set you up in a big way after you have kids, in a positive way. But changes in your sex life, that's not something that you necessarily can totally anticipate. Maybe you won't feel much of a change. Maybe your desire will kind of plummet and you won't understand why, and it might be way different than it was before kids. So have a plan in place to say, when this comes up or if this comes up, how are we going to approach these issues? And just by talking about them ahead of time, having a plan ahead of time, you can go into having kids feeling really prepared for whatever possibilities might come your way. Then I think there's things that you can do as a future mother to prepare. Like one is taking the time to explore your relationship with your own mother, or if you didn't have a mother, the lack of mother and what that looks like for you. Because there are often things that sort of, I call them like templates or scripts or things like that, that exist below the surface that come out after kids are brought into the relationship or brought into your life that you just didn't really know about yourself. It happens with your partner too. There'll be things that you're like, I didn't know that about you. Now we have kids and you're like, these things are coming out I didn't know. Or why are you so much like your father? These things creep up. And so taking some time to self-reflect, because a lot of times these scripts start to, after kids, develop into the expectations we have for ourselves as mothers. So our relationship with our mom is one source of that, or lack of mom, that matters too, is one source of these expectations. There are other sources, social media, for all the good that it can provide. There is a dark side to some of that can shape some of our expectations. And so exploring some of this ahead of time can just help you get to know where some of the hangups can be later on when you're a mom. Like, we develop these wild expectations of ourselves that largely are silent until we have kids. And so one of them is often good moms don't really need much help. And so if we can unearth these expectations ahead of time and start challenging them in real time in real relationships, we can be better equipped when we do have kids to ask for the help we need, to say, this is an expectation, I know where it comes from, but this is actually not realistic. And so I'm not gonna try to live up to it in my experience as a mom. And I think that's really powerful, because I hear from women all the time how much difficulty they have asking for help, or how much guilt they experience as a mother. And I believe a lot of it comes from these sort of unexplored expectations that we have for ourselves.
It's interesting that you say that, because I'm sitting here thinking my mother, who is absolutely unbelievable, and I'm really blessed to have her still in my life, and I'm so blessed to have her be the mother that she is. And even if she listens to this episode, I think she will agree with the fact that I think one of her best qualities is that she is like the craziest multitasker. She does it all, and she does it all so well. But I think that's also her biggest detriment. And I have totally taken that on. And so I could see that if I'm not aware that that could be a potential downfall when I do become a new mom, that I might fall into a pattern that's really not healthy.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's such a great observation about your own mom, because if you haven't noticed this, right, if you've not explored this, it will be really easy for your standard of what a good mother looks like to be somebody who multitasks and who does it really, really well, which is so hard. And also, we don't have all of like the behind the scenes of our childhood, what our moms were going through. And so we're just like drawing these conclusions based on these kind of like memories.
Exactly.
Probably you see it in your mom now. It's just a recipe to feel like you're chronically falling short as a mom. And we have plenty of places in our lives that's going to get stirred up. And so you can prepare a little bit to kind of negate some of those before you're a mom.
So now, if we don't have a therapist or someone amazing like you to speak to, how do we explore these things? Like, I feel like it's so hard to just sit there and be like, okay, so what parts of my mom might I have that could affect me? You know what I mean? Like, how do we physically do this work?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, actually. It's so easy to talk about it like out here in this like theoretical perspective. So I like to be very practical. I mean, if I were sitting with someone, they're like, how do I do this? My steps for them would be, number one, like get out pad of paper and a pen when you have some quiet time and write about, what you saw in your mother. Like, what was your mother like? Answer these questions. What was your mother like? How did she handle her emotions? When she was angry, what did she seem like? How does she show you love and affection? If you had to describe a good mother, what do you think a good mother looks like? And what does a good mother do? And I would just start journaling about some of these things. You don't have to do it in one sitting, right? But working through some of these prompts to help to kind of flush out some of these things that might emerge that you haven't really thought about before. And then, a lot of times when we can finally get to a place where we can articulate our expectations of ourselves, then you can hold them up to reality. And some of it you might be able to do before kids, and then some of it you might have to do after. And that's kind of what you have to do, is you have to like test them in reality. So if you're not a mom yet, talk to some seasoned mothers. Like, do you have help? How do you ask for help? What does that look like? What hang-ups kind of get, do you struggle with? And just sort of pick their brains and get kind of a more well-rounded perspective on motherhood. And I think that can be helpful. And even exploring some of these expectations with your partner can be helpful, because you're going to bring forward expectations you have for what your partner's like as a parent, which is a source of a lot of conflict when they are not measuring up to what you imagine they'd be, even though you probably never talked about it. And then what you imagine they'll be like as a partner to you after your parents. And so bringing some of these conversations to the forefront can flush out a lot ahead of time.
Going back to the mother conversation too, it is so important, as you mentioned in the beginning, that if you don't have a mother that was present, whether she passed too soon or she was absent, that is such an important thing. I interviewed one of my dearest friends, and she's not my sister, but I call her my sister. I believe it was episode 11. I will link that episode if you'd like in the show notes for anyone who's listening. But it was entitled Being a Motherless Mother. And it was all about what she went through, because she didn't really anticipate it, but going through her motherhood journey without her mom started to bring up all of these things, that she had worked through some of them, but not worked through all of them. And it's really an important thing to be aware of. And so especially if you're in that category, I would highly recommend listen to that episode and do some of this work. And even maybe, like you say, Morgan, asking yourself the questions in that situation, like that you might not want to go through. You may have to have a moment in a bathtub and cry a little bit about it. But what did this time without your mother, how did this affect you? And what do you wish you had and she was here for? And all of these questions. And that could be really challenging to go through. But just like with the relationship, I think you're saying so important to go through, because I think naturally come up with these imaginary thoughts of what we are expecting and what we're hoping and what we're, whether that's of our children, I imagine, or our partner for sure. And really talking about that and realizing that what we've dreamed up for our partner to be as a father or as a support when we're pregnant or support in birth. I might imagine that I would love my husband, Kevin, to be so present at my birth, but like maybe that time comes and he's like so nauseous and so overwhelmed that he can't even be in the room, we have to be prepared for all of these roller coaster sidetracks.
Yes, exactly. So I kind of want to go back to something and then come back to where you are, because you just said something that triggered a thought for me that I want to share, but about your friend, the motherless mother.
Yeah.
So my mom is adopted, and it's not like a super common experience, but part of her sort of exploration of her past is exploring the mom who gave her up. Right? And then also the mom who she ended up with. So people who are listening to this who might have more complicated experiences with mothers, it's good to explore all of those. Because being turned over at 2 months old for my mom had a dramatic impact. We talk about attachment styles and abandonment and all of these different things that get stirred up later on when you have children. And the point I want to make is that painful past experiences absolutely shape us. However, we don't have to repeat them. And so part of the process of kind of digging into some of the past stuff can be, how do I want to be similar to the mother I had? How do I want to be different? And what are things that I absolutely do not want to repeat with my own children that I experienced? And being really intentional about thinking through those 3 areas can be really helpful. And also just reassuring to people who had bad family experiences or hard or traumatic. Some of the most, like my mom is such an incredible mother, and it is in so many ways because of all of the pain that she went through. And you don't have to go through pain to be a good mom, but she was so determined to do it differently.
So beautiful. And when it comes down to our partners, of course, having these conversations from the beginning, if we have the luxury to do that, is so key and so important. What would you say beyond that? You know, we were talking a little bit ago about some of these practical things, like grab a pen and paper. I love that, you know, that's what I need. I need to be told exactly what to do. And so as I sit here and I think, and I've had this conversation with my husband, we've been together for 13 years. We've been married for 4. And we often joke, but it's also a serious conversation over, like, when we do have kids, we're either going to be like badass parents and we're going to know each other so well because we've been together so long. It's going to be just like, you know, seamless, or it's going to tear us apart. And this life that we've had for the past 13 years is now no longer the same, and we're not going to know how to handle it. So how can we stay close knit through all of the ups and downs and all of the challenges that we're going to explore?
That's such a good question. The big thing that you can do is get in a habit of regularly checking in with your partner. I feel like I am like a broken record with this point. It's the core of our couples course. We call them huddles in that course, but whatever you want to call it a business meeting. People are like, oh, that's so formal. Yeah, that's okay.
Sometimes,
You know, we manage all these aspects of our life, but when it comes to our relationships, we don't think of it in that same way, that we need to manage them. And we do. They're one of the most important parts of our life. And especially you bring kids into the picture, and your relationship is the foundation for their development. So it is so important that you're strong. So one of the big things you can do is schedule, depending on how you operate as a couple, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly check-ins, where you just have a sit down. It doesn't have to be boring, and it doesn't have to be long. Actually, I recommend you don't make it long. And you just check in. How are we doing on meeting each other's needs? How's our sex life going? What are you needing that I'm just like totally missing? Or we've been really busy. Let's put something on the calendar to catch up and just stay on top of it, because I don't think it's often that a relationship brings kids into the mix and then it just falls apart. Right out of the blue, suddenly we just don't function anymore. That's not usually what happens. What usually happens is that there are small things that start to create vulnerability in the relationship, that start to erode the closeness. They just go unaddressed. They're just below the surface, little things here and there. Before you know it, you're down the path of resentment, or you're not having sex. Your closeness and feelings of love start to disappear because it's been eroded by these little tiny things that have just not gotten attended to. And so the best preventative thing is to just stay on top of that. Don't let those things develop and erode at your closeness.
I once heard it kind of described similarly as if we're putting up these Post-it notes. And I have so many Post-it notes that I need to stop. I need to put them away. But it's like, for example, you walk into your bathroom, your husband's underwear is on the floor. Oh, just put up a Post-it. He mentioned that he would take out the trash and he happened not to. So I go over there and I see that it's not taken out. Oh, I put up a Post-it. You know, whatever these things are, he said that he would, you know, be free for us to have this conversation. And then a work call came up. Oh, put up a Post-it. Like whatever it is, if we keep putting up these Post-its, they kind of start clouding our view and our vision and our love too. And then we don't address those Post-its. And that's kind of creating the barrier that in this list, right? This like imaginary list.
So What you're talking about is, so in our course, for example, we give almost like an outline to these meetings. And what you're talking about is one of the categories, or one of the pieces. And we label it as trust. We define trust as your belief in someone else, right? Like what you believe about them. This is the interesting piece, is what we believe about people is based on some fact, right? Some of what we know about them, but also it's based a lot on what we think about what we know. And so over time, what we do in our relationship is and we do this with everybody, not just our partners, we do it with our kids, our acquaintances, everybody. We create these sort of internal pictures. So it's like a picture in your head of your partner. This is largely what we interact with in our relationships, more really than the partner in reality. And so this is what you're using these Post-its to formulate your picture, right? Oh, my partner's a slob, their underwear. My partner is not considerate that I try to keep the house clean. Oh, he's so selfish, never considering me and how he plans his day. He's, all these sort of types of things that we start focusing on rearranges the pieces of our picture. And so we move the negative to the forefront and all the good to the background. And that's all we're seeing. And you're exactly right that it then starts to cloud our perspective on our partner and erode just like the feelings. It changes the tone in the relationship when, so now even if your partner does something and it wasn't at all because they were being sloppy or selfish, maybe they were distracted or stressed, we still jump to those conclusions. We make those assumptions. We react to things in that particular way. And so part of this is the sort of work and why you do these check-ins is that in relationships, there's an individual piece and there's a dynamic piece. So some of this stuff is individual stuff. And so part of it is taking responsibility for how you form the picture in your head of your partner.
Yes,
and taking responsibility for rearranging the pieces and for cleaning it out. We have to take inventory and clean some of that stuff out. How do I shift my perspective of my partner to be more positive? How do I see the good in them? Or am I just paying attention to only the bad things that annoy me? If that's how you operate, you're going to sour the tone of your relationship so quickly.
And I can imagine, too, especially with a newborn, you're in that postpartum phase. You have all these hormones rushing through your body. You're sleep deprived. Like, the last thing you're going to think of is, thank you, sweetheart, for bringing me that water. That was so kind of you. Instead, you're going to think, why didn't you make that dinner that I asked you to make? That's just naturally, it's easier for us to do that. But it's really a total paradigm shift is what I'm hearing.
Yes, it absolutely is. And I think, you add in the hormonal shifts. And I know personally, I'm not an anxious person. I had so much anxiety after our daughter was born. And then again, after our son, at least I was prepared the second time. Anxiety will make you more kind of quick to snap and quick to jump. And so it is a paradigm shift, but this is also why it's good to do this before kids. I'll never forget this study that I read. I think it was out of the UK, and it was a qualitative study, so it's just stories, really. And they did some assessments, but it was a mother's transition into motherhood, and tons of moms just told their stories. And what they found was the moms who invited their partners in and involved them right from the beginning had the smoothest transitions into motherhood. And I'm talking things like, you have a couple-week-old and you're like, here you go, I'm going out to run some errands. Things that I think are really hard. I know it would have been hard for me. I wish I would have done a better job of that. That's something to remember too, is that right after the baby's born is a very vulnerable time as a mom because everything's new and you're figuring it out. But it's really important and can save you in the long run if you allow your partner to be part of the figuring it out process. Because then they know what's going on and you don't have to teach them later on when they're like, I don't know what to do. You're the one who does it all.
Exactly.
So,
what is that term?
Maternal gatekeeping.
Maternal gatekeeping. Yes. Yes. And I can see how it can feel like you just carried this baby for 9 months. You just birthed this baby, however it came out of you. It's like, it's your responsibility, but really, I think it's that separation. And if you just take that, even if it's just a 10-minute walk around the block, in the beginning, right? To just explore how that feels, to give them a bit more responsibility and for you to have a little bit of freedom. And then I think they'll probably start to gain a little more confidence in that as well, too, right? Because I would imagine that they might even feel almost like a third wheel, kind of.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the confidence piece is really big that you're touching on. And I think, too, leading up to a baby and even through parenthood, we're the ones that usually are reading all the books and paying attention and doing all the research.
Right.
And so when the baby comes along, we're like, well, we're qualified. Right. So we'll tell you what to do and follow our lead. And that ends up backfiring a lot of times. And also then makes us seem like we know it all and our partners don't. And it's so much better to help just to navigate it together and to help your partner build confidence, like you said.
In the beginning, though, when we're pregnant, we're expecting, we're an aspiring mom, our partners might not necessarily be as apt to pick up a book or to listen to this podcast. They might feel like it's not their thing. What would be a good way for us to approach this, even if it's just like a wording or something that we can use to encourage our partners to take that initiative before the baby's even earthside?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't actually know if I have a good answer for that question. So one idea I have, and this isn't wording, but one of the best things my husband and I did with our first is we went to classes before the baby was born. And I happen to have a home birth, and so it's a little different kind of world, right, than hospital birth and perspective on some things. But it doesn't matter. There are classes for any type of birth. That really was eye-opening for him. Oh, wow, I need to know how to do a swaddle, or I need to know how to, if you choose to do that, right? Or is there some ways to burp a baby, or just kind of like brought him in to that conversation. And it wasn't me directed.
Yes.
I think that it's like
so important,
right? To like be one more thing that we've got to manage. Now we got to manage making sure our partners are consuming, this information can be really stressful and frustrating. And so that was something that was really big for us that I thought was really helpful. I just know I'm more of a research-minded person. Like probably a lot of us women are, but he's not so curious about some of these things. And I'm in the world with the kids more often than him. And so one way I've approached this is that when there's something big, like when I know our kid is going through something in particular and I want to be aligned, I want to be a united front on this particular way of handling these things, I'll just have a conversation with him about that, which is, our son Roy is going through X, Y, or Z. Obviously, my husband notices these things too. And I'll say, for this particular issue, I want to both handle it like this. And I don't think he's ever argued about that. He's like, okay. Or I'll say, I have this podcast that I listen to that I think really explains a lot about what's going on with Effie. And do you mind listening to it? And so he always is willing. And I know not every partner is that way, but a lot of them are. And so when it's very clear, no, it can't hurt to ask. And especially when it's clear, it's not like go out and find a parenting book. It's like, I want to share something like this with you. I think the other thing is that there's value in doing things differently. There's some things you want to be aligned on. Your values as parents, certain modes of discipline, I think are important. How are you going to handle that? Be aligned on those things. But also, there's value to having different parents. Yeah. How I parent and how I play with the kids is way different than how my husband does. But it's important that they get how he does it. Right. And get that different experience. They might not do it like us, but there's value.
100%. And I was actually just watching a show the other day that made me think of kind of this aspect too. And if you kind of give them something to explore, whether that's like, watch this podcast, check out this YouTube video, watch this show, whatever, or let's watch this together, let's listen to this together, because then it doesn't become you instructing them. In this show that I was watching the other day, this wife was saying how she was actually feeling like she had 3 kids because she felt like she always had to take care of her husband. And that doesn't feel good, I imagine, for the husband. And that doesn't feel good for the wife, and probably also doesn't feel good for the kids too. So I imagine just thinking about delivering your message or communicating your thoughts to your partner in that type of a way, in an inclusion type of a way, really can set the path for the future to be a little bit more even and not so single-handed.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting on so many things. This idea that your partner is another child is also something I end up hearing a lot from women. And I think, what I said about involving them early on is also something that helps to prevent that down the road.
Yeah.
Sometimes why women will feel like their partner's an extra child is because they're having to manage the responsibilities that their partner's in charge of. Like, now can you take out the trash?
Right.
Now can you do this? And now can you? So involving them early and figuring out that sort of mental load stuff before kids is really key. I think another thing that you can do to involve your partner in some of these parenting dilemmas or birthing things or things like that is to just ask their opinion. For example, I've come to my husband many times and said, I'm at a loss here for this particular issue with Roy or with Effie. What are your ideas? And allowing them to it sounds so dumb and simple, but
giving them the opportunity.
To participate.
Yes.
To participate. And again, they can feel like the third wheel or feel like you're the expert and they're one down. And so that is not a fun place for anybody to be in. And so to invite them in, this is a collaborative effort here. What are your ideas? I'm not the keeper of every single answer.
100%. Another little tip that I just wanted to share, I have used with my husband for many years now. We both use it for each other, but I more so do it because I'm the one that lets my imagination go, is a Brene Brown statement where she says the story that I'm telling myself. So if you don't communicate in this way with your partner, you do, like we talked about, create this imaginary list and start to tell these stories to yourself about what's happening. And so I've found that just that simple phrase and coming to my partner and saying the story that I'm telling myself, and I know that this is not real, but the story that I'm telling myself is that you don't really care for the way that I like to keep the house and that it's important to have a clean house and do these certain things. I know that that's not right, but it really just boils down to the trash. And oftentimes that takes off the pressure.
Yeah, I actually do that too in my own relationship.
Yeah.
I had that conversation with my husband where I'll be like, so this happened and this is how I'm processing it and but I know this is not right. So can you correct it? Can you help me? And basically, with this picture that we have, we fill in the blanks for our partners so often. And so just to check that our conclusions against how they would conclude our story can make a huge difference in kind of shifting out of it. I think a lot of times we personalize things between our partner, like the trash. It's not the trash anymore when now it's about how they respect you. Right. Oh my gosh, that's so big, right? Or how thoughtful they are, or they're so selfish, wrapped up in your own world. You don't even notice anything around the house. This stuff is not important enough for you to do. We start to really personalize it and also make meaning out of it. And so I think that, sometimes we can check this stuff with our partners, but also we sometimes need to do it on our own.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to check it on our own. And I give the example a lot of my husband. He has these black socks and I will find them all over the house. Just in a little ball. I find them outside. I'll find them in my office. We share it a lot, so our office, but I find them by the couch. I'll find them, and it's either black socks or hats. And so it would be really easy for me to get ticked off about it, right? What the heck, man? Just throw them in the hamper. What am I, your personal maid? Are you kidding me? I'm busy too. Or whatever we do, we've all been there. But instead, my husband travels a ton for work. And so when I see those black socks around the house, those are signs that my husband is here and he's around, and I'm grateful for that. And so you can't do this with everything. People sometimes are like, are you serious? You can't do this. I recognize that. You can't, if you've got a complete partner who is just so not thoughtful about things, right? So you're going to have a conversation maybe. Yeah. But there are lots of little things
that we can just shift. Yep.
that we collect and we personalize it and we make this huge meaning out of, that we can shift the meaning. Mm-hmm. And so now every time I see the socks, I gladly pick them up and I throw them in the hamper, and I'm like intentional about this. I'm so glad my husband's home. Mm. And so I think there are things that are worth talking about, absolutely, especially when we're just replaying these tapes over and over. But then there are also things that we can do on our own that go a long way.
Dr. Morgan, I feel like I could talk to you for another 5,000 hours.
Probably.
My Love Thinks.
Totally could.
Can you just share with everyone listening all about My Love Thinks? It's a father-daughter duo, and you guys really are empowered to help people continue to stay in love and fall in love without all of this drama and this stress. And so what is Love Thinks, and how can people get help from it and from you?
My dad started Love Thinks a long time ago. He was creating courses before that was the cool thing to do, and has been teaching them for over 25 years. And I've worked with him for around 13 years. And we develop basically from psychological research and theory. We take that and translate it into very practical tools you can use to maintain your relationships. And we have courses for singles, couples. I have a course on the mental load, parenting, and you can learn all about it at My Love Thinks, which is our blog. Tons of free content on there and articles. And then on my Instagram, I share tons of information, regular series on relationship topics, and that's My Love Thinks as well.
I love it. And I'll have those links all in the show notes so people can easily access you and all of your amazing knowledge.
If there was advice I wish I had heard, it would be three things. It's okay to ask for help. You're going to need it. Get good at it. You can't do it all. So I guess that's one thing. So 2 things. And then the last thing would be, my young child's behavior is not a reflection of how good of a mom I am. Mm. And I think that is one that I struggled with for a long time, and would save a lot of moms heartache and personal self-judgment.
Yeah. Absolutely beautiful. Dr. Morgan, thank you so much for your time and your knowledge and such beautiful wisdom. If we can get really good and we have the opportunity to talk about this stuff beforehand and to communicate this with our partners, with our family members, and internally with ourselves, it can only set us up for success in the future in our journey into motherhood. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was so nice talking with you.
Whew, I don't know about you, but that conversation really hit home for me. I mean, how many times have you responded to that imaginary picture of your partner rather than seeing the good in them? I know I do that way too much, and starting today, it's definitely something I need to start practicing. Did you ever think about how much of an impact your relationship with your own mother can influence your experience as you become a mother? The tools that Dr. Morgan gave us to journal about those possible circumstances and work through them is such a beautiful resource to navigating this new chapter of motherhood. And I don't know about you, but a practical tool like that is always something I need to hear. And last but not least, don't forget to ask for help. And even ask for help before you're swamped, before you're in the thick of it. And if you'd like to get help from women who are in your shoes, I'd love to have you join us in the Mamas in Training Facebook group. All you have to do is click on the link in the show notes that says Facebook Community and be welcomed immediately by a beautiful group of women who are all practicing asking for help. You don't have to do this alone. We are here for you. Thank you for listening today, and I hope this conversation gave you a few more tools to have a loving and supportive partnership as you go through your motherhood journey. If you enjoyed the show today, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts so I know how to better serve you. I'd also love for you to join our community of Mamas in Training on Facebook. You can find me at Mamas in Training on Instagram and at mamasintraining.com. For Mamas in Training, I'm Jessica Lorian. We're in this together.